It is 7 o'clock. We will call to order the August 12th Planning and Zoning meeting. First item is a motion to approve July minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
All right, motion passes.
Next item is the staff report. Jack?
Yes. Procedurally, and to give you guys a better understanding of where this is going, we sent out certified letters in this case, but none of those folks are here. In the staff report, I'm going to give you a brief snippet of what's going on in Smithville, kind of around, and you can ask questions. The second half of it, I'm going to introduce the consultants on this overlay project, and they will be able to speak as a staff report. To the extent we have no one here for the public hearing, we don't have to, we can, once that's, you can open it, close it, and then we'll go straight into your discussion. So that's procedurally where we're at. To give you guys a heads up, October meeting is going to have a request for rezoning and a preliminary plat for a new subdivision off of KK. Used to be called River Place years ago, but never developed. It got done right before the wheels fell off the economy in the housing industry. And it sit there as a preliminary plat and then went, it expired 10 years ago. It's been purchased. Somebody else is coming in with a different layout, and they'll be presenting that, both the rezoning and the subdivision request. I anticipate, but I don't know when, I anticipate a plat for the Willow Creek subdivision, which is Second Creek Meadows, but it's now going to be changed. The Board of Aldermen approved that rezoning. So we'll see when they get it. They've got a timeline to finish that. It may be November before they get it here. We'll see. Brandy and I just went over this. Those two, what else? Oh, the reason.
Marketplace.
Yeah,
Oh,
we've got
yep.
a rezoning out at the, if you go out Main Street where it curves and then it turns and curves back, there's a house right there on the corner. Somebody's acquired that house and the land next to it. There's a little triangle and they're going to rezone it. Seek to rezone it to B3, which is the district that is called for in the planning commission or in the comprehensive plan for that overlay district that we haven't created there. So it's to, they're going to seek B3 for cabins. They're going to propose 10 little cabins in there as a rental business. And then we have a new subdivision of land for the marketplace to create 3 new lots, I guess. Small 1 acre one just north of Burger King, and then a 2 acre lot or thereabouts just north of that one. And then the third lot will be all the rest of that land. We have been 2 businesses, AutoZone and Les Schwab Tires, have submitted requests through the TIF process to be able to buy that land. That's been approved through the TIF process. It's an administrative decision made by the city administrator. So those are the 2 businesses that will be coming in. They have a full conceptual plan there. When they did that, that was the very first one we had. And that process goes through, their buildings have to get approved by their architectural committee, which is basically the architect who designed it for the developer. And then if they approve it as harmonious with their design motif there, then it comes to us, staff, and we do a review to make sure that their landscaping and all the other site plan things meet those standards. And it will never come before you guys for that. It just gets approved, and we will then cut building permits once we know that they're going to meet those standards. My guess is both of them have indicated they want to move quick. So maybe this fall, we will, and there are no utilities to install, so it's just buildings. So you may see groundbreaking on both of those later this year. So things are happening. We've been notified that a new business is going to be coming in. And we'll start out by probably by leasing some space from the RV storage place. Used to be KCI, that's my understanding. About 40 jobs, well-paying jobs that will be coming in, and they were proposing to buy land there by what's now 148th Street to build their own facility over time. So that's happening. We anticipated, you were notified in the past that we were anticipating an application for 252 apartments in 4 buildings at Fairview. The owner of the development, Shane Crease, and I had been trying to make final contact with that applicant. That applicant, Shane's attorney called his attorney to find out what's going on. Why is nobody calling us back? Apparently, they have pulled the plug on it. So they're not going to do it. And Mr. Crease is moving to the second person in line that was interested in it. So that'll be a little delay on that, but they are already under construction for phase 2 of Fairview South. So that's undergoing construction now. Across the street, you can see that TIF project is moving forward. It's starting to get serious now. So it will continue to grow. I would imagine in 2 weeks, the whole 2-story part of it will be built, and they'll be starting on the 3rd as quickly as they're moving. So, and then once all that's done, then they've got the rest of it. Their time frame for completion required under their agreement with the city on the TIF agreement is by August of next year. And they are on track to meet that, so. And they finished paving the parking lot and striping it. There are some extraneous work around it that we still are going to require, and they will be extending a sidewalk and repairing some cracks that have already shown up. It's one of the things that happens when concretes get poured and it's 108 degree outside. So, and I think that's all. If you have any questions about development going on, I will try to answer it, but, just had another call, forgot. We anticipate 13 building permits will be coming for the north side of Lake Meadows Drive, which is Clay Creek Meadows, those single-family homes. I've been in contact with the purchaser, and they are preparing their plans to submit for building permits there. And it's a big national corporation, so they're likely going to have a whole bunch of people working, just rolling them out. And the developer is now moving to start the water, sewer, street, and storm construction for phase 2 of Clay Creek Meadows, which includes a rehabilitation of the Diamond Crest pump station area. The overflow basin has to be redesigned or rebuilt. So they will start that work as soon as I think Brandy's already submitted the permit invoices. So we're waiting for payment, and their contractors will start probably this week. So sorry for a lot of information there. I think that's north to south. That's the south to north, I guess. That's the entire city. Any questions about that development? Oh, definitely no meeting next month. I will not be around. Will's going to be gone some of the days as well, the day before, day after. We got some vacations coming up, so we will be out. And we have, the only applications are for October already anyway, so I think that's all. Okay.
I'll run that meeting as well, since no one's going to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be easy. No quorum, no problem. So tonight's advertised purpose, we've sent out, just so you know, we sent certified letters to each of the property owners of the land involved in this, one of which has contacted me. And they may very well be watching this. And it's the land south of the water tower. That main 40, that frontage right there, that was purchased in the last 6 months by somebody out of Texas, and they are trying to prepare plans associated with what ultimately happens with the overlay district so that they can package it for sale to developers to build on. They're the only ones that have made contact with me specifically. Nobody else has. So we put this out in the paper, advertised it, and our consultants, which is Julie and Sean, here, and you've met them before. They've created a website. That's the website you go to if you go to the city website, and it clicks you to a link that gives you the explanation of what's been going on. They've been working with all of the public comments, your previous input, our staff input from Will and I, and Gina and Cynthia. We all had some input on it. And they've come up with drafts of documents that we are here to have them make a presentation on. They're going to walk you through what it is, how they got there. If you have any questions, I'd ask that you let them finish. We'll do the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then go to discussion. Then you get to ask her all the questions, if that's acceptable to you. And actually, before we finish, now that I'm thinking about it, since we have nobody in the public, it might be easier if we just do the public hearing, open it, close it. No one's here anyway. Then she can make a presentation. You guys can start your discussion. Everything is not broken up, if that makes sense. Ultimately, that would be staff's recommendation to the chair to go ahead and open the public hearing. Seeing none, close it, and then we'll give the floor to Julie to start.
All right, we'll open up public hearing. Seeing there is none, we will close it and move on.
There we go.
Are we gonna do?
Yeah, I would, if you can, go ahead and request that the discussion, a motion to open discussion and do that voice vote, and then we'll give the floor to Julie with Snyder and Associates.
Do I have a motion to open up the discussion for the board?
So moved. Second.
Voice vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
There we go. We are ready for Julie to begin. She's got a slideshow and all kinds of neat stuff, I hope. She and Brandy have been we've had some bad luck with our tech of the last 4 or 5 months here at City Hall. So I'm hoping Brandy and she worked it out. They were here working earlier, so thank you.
Yep, slides, please. The first one, yep. You can go ahead, yep. So again, I'm Julie Cruz with Snyder and Associates and closer, sorry. Julie Cruz with Snyder and Associates, and we've been working with Jack and the city on the overlay district for the 169 South Employment Overlay District for some time. So we're here tonight to discuss the draft document. It's not complete. We expect there to be some changes and get some feedback from the commission this evening. I like to kind of refresh myself. So some of this you probably already know or recall. I know we had an online Zoom meeting, I think back in February of last year, with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Economic Development Committee at that time. So some of this, I don't know if all of you are the same or some of you may be different from that, but so we started out with knowing that we needed to do an overlay district and a new zoning code for this area. We started looking at your comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan that you have is wonderful, by the way. I think it's really nicely done, whoever did that for you. But it called out some character areas. And this is the south character overlay. So this is more than the area, but this is just kind of a general diagram of some of the changes, the areas of change from the comprehensive plan. You can go to the next one. So here you can see on the left, the study area, and then the bottom one is your future land use plan. So with the, sorry, is that like feedback? With the future land use plan designation, I believe that that is medium density. I believe that's what if I recall that correctly. But then it also, your comprehensive plan also had some goals in it. More of the goal, there's many more goals, as you know, that would apply to this area and what we're trying to do here. But some of the key ones I think are on this page in your comprehensive plan, and it's focus on technology and business company, bioscience companies to bring into Smithville. Use your location as to the airport as leverage, and and then pursue tourism business potential and create and industrial zones are the other two. So the top two are the most applicable, I believe, to what we're trying to do with this overlay. If you can go to the next one. And then the right is just an exhibit also from the comprehensive plan, and it calls out, you know, you can see that there are some key intersections, gateway points of interest as you travel down the High 169 through Smithville. And at the very bottom of that is where this location, the site is. The comprehensive plan, you know, calls for this area to have mixed use, high density, future residential, some commercial uses, some hopefully attract those businesses that you don't have, those biosciences potentially. The comprehensive plan also included higher education facilities. So maybe there's a satellite location from one of the colleges or universities in the Kansas City area, potentially, or community college if there's one nearby. And then multifamily residential along with some single family. So that's really what it's kind of trying to leverage a unique kind of area for Smithville that you don't currently have. You can go to the next one. So once this overlay is adopted and you have some new zoning regulations, again, hope to see those new employment areas, a mix of commercial, but also each one, it's already a process in your plan that when you have a planned development area, you have to submit a concept plan. So that'll be part of it. Any project that comes in, I believe the draft code says over 2 acres will have to have a concept plan. So you'll get a more detailed view of that, where building locations, street layout, things along those lines. And then also, obviously, this area is not developed, so there'll be some subdividing that will be needed, and this is not changing any of your subdivision regulations. So all the platting processes and requirements and reviews that you have today will still apply to any future development in the area. Go to the next one. So what is an overlay? So you have your base overlays, your base districts. In Smithville, those are your R1, 2, 3, B1, 2, 3 industrial. You'll notice in the draft ordinance that it was intentional that I is not included in the table, nor I believe the C3 maybe is the one we took out. We took out B4, thank you, B4 we removed. So basically you'll have an applicant will come in, they'll have to apply for a rezoning, and it will be one of those base districts. So they can comply with those, or they can go, if you will, above and beyond, if you want to say it that way, look at it that way. And there'll be some, it allows some flexibility in their uses and their design and low site planning that will be reviewed and allowed. So this is an example of an zoning, what an overlay map might look like. In your land use plan, it has some hatching on it today. This is not a Smithville, obviously, zoning district, but you can see that dash line and it had those O's mean an overlay district. So anything within those dash lined areas, it will be on your zoning map, it would be demarcated somehow, and that's where this would apply. So you might even have areas adjacent to this that, you know, will have similar zoning, but not the overlay opportunities. You can go to the next one. Currently, there's kind of standard and form-based zoning. Standard zoning is primarily what you see in Smithville today. That's the most common. It's very much use-based. That the primary goal of that is to separate your uses and control your site development, your setbacks, your building coverage, your parking, things along those lines. Your form-based zoning looks more at the built environment before it looks at the use. So it might allow, depending on what the zoning code says as far as uses permitted, it might allow uses to be adjacent to each other or in the same building that you don't see today in Smithville. Sometimes it goes as far as even addressing what the street looks like, the widths of the street trees, things like that. Again, we're not changing any of your subdivision ordinances, so street widths, things like that are not going to be changing at this time. You can go to the next one. Like I said, so this is an example, B2, B3, those are your commercial districts, your standard zoning. Limits your density, floor area, your bulk density regulations. You can go to the next one. This is an example of a form-based. So it allows you to get your buildings closer together. Like I said, increase some densities that you normally don't have. Your zoning regulations will look a little different. It might have a build to line instead of a setback. So that means you have to pull the building up. You have to build at that point rather than being at least this far back. You have to be this close. That's what a build to line is. A lot of times it'll control like transparency, the amount of windows. Sometimes when you get into building, mixed use buildings, sometimes you even see it control the height of building floors. Things like that. Ours does not get into that deep. And again, you can go to the next one. And then here's just kind of an example of how the left would be more of your standard zoning, your standard subdivision. And on the right top is what you could potentially see in your more intense developments in the overlay district. You're more of your commercial or mixed use areas if a developer were to be interested in this type of a development. You can go down. So what we're finding with Smithville and the way it's developed and what we got from public feedback and feedback from the commission in prior engagement sessions is that we're really kind of looking at a hybrid code. So you're going to still have that standard zoning in your base districts like you have today that people can follow. And the overlay list district is where you're going to see some of those form-based codes that allow kind of that mixture of uses. So you can, so engagement wise, we started on August 26th of 2024. That was the first meeting we had on Zoom. We conducted it through the project website. It was private webpage. So at that meeting, only you had access to it or we had access to it, the city. We had quick poll questions. We had some different images to kind of talk about some visioning and how you think you foresee the area developing and feeling and functioning. And then we kept that open for a couple days, or for I believe 2 weeks, we kept it open so that you could sit and kind of think about it and come back in and answer and leave comments. And so that's what those yellow boxes are. That's just a snippet of some of those. And then other people that had access could thumbs up, thumbs down. So you could kind of have a little bit of interaction there. You can go to the next one. Yeah, you can skip this one. We talked about what residential might look like. So having that base district will still allow you a standard subdivision. Some of these are a little extreme, I know, but it's to get more the point across than actually what you might see. But so it's a very typical suburban one in the top left, single family. Or you could get as creative as the bottom two, a pocket neighborhood, or some residential live work buildings like you see on the left bottom one. You can go down. We talked about mixed use and what your vision for those, the intensity level. I believe some of the there was a question about building height, what was too tall. I think we probably all would not be surprised that 5 or more stories was not preferred. It was the 1 to 3 to 4 is kind of where the feedback landed. You can go to the next one. And then we talked to us also about what kind of feel or look, what you might expect for the commercial area, the mixed use, the more outlot type of development, one building on a lot. Obviously, the one on the bottom left corner is extremely dense and not appropriate. But it was just there to kind of, again, spark conversation. The other two, the one on the bottom right, you know, has a lot of green space allowed in it, but buildings are kind of clustered together to preserve some of that open space. The top left is more of a traditional business park that you might see in Smithville or other surrounding areas. And then that middle one on the bottom kind of is that hybrid look, right? You have some of those maybe more intense residential mixed use buildings on the edge, and then you have some pad sites and in the interior, kind of stepping that intensity back. You can go to the next one. On February 7th of 2025, the website was made public to the citizens of Smithville. Some of the same and additional images were added. So questions were still answered or asked and answered as well. We had 3 different, on the right, we had kind of 3 different scenarios, bubble diagrams of the intensity and types of uses you might see. Excuse me. This one was preferred. I think it's, again, probably not a surprise that people prefer one with some open space, and that was some of the other comments and answers that we got to, was to preserve that green space and use it as an amenity. Given the topography, I think that's going to happen no matter what, but future developers can take that into account and really work that into their site with interior trails and sidewalks, and then connecting to your existing trail system. If you want to go to the next one. We also asked what should be prioritized in terms of land use, because really that's kind of the point of this overlay district specifically. It is the 169 South employment overlay. So this is the kind of you can see on the left the responses we got. I just kind of put the right one, the image on the right. So Kansas City there's the Greater Kansas City Economic Development has kind of termed it the arc of innovation. And in that they talk about how it is the most, what do they call it? It has something to, I'm blanking on it now, I'm sorry, but it was like, there's more bioscience and animal related industries in the Kansas City area than any other place in the world. So really you can leverage off of that if you are interested in, and just kind of marking the airport and the proximity to Smithville and those other communities. So all those red dots are ones that are towns that are identified by the Kansas City Economic Development Group as areas where some of those animal science industries exist and have hubs, if you want to put it that way. So really you're right in there with the rest of them. So there is opportunity I believe, for those bioscience uses and those more unique high-tech industries, or the educational ones as you have in the comprehensive plan too. You can go to the next one. So here we are today. This is kind of a little bit different. So it keeps the yellow and the green and the orange in the same place. But we added the red for a mix of uses, and they do overlap intentionally. So you can see along Highway 169, you're gonna have those more intense uses. The red would really be maybe some standalone businesses or tech users, light, I don't want to say light industrial because it's not a base district that's allowed, but maybe some of those micro manufacturing or cottage industries, those are some terms we can talk about in a minute, would be along that way. Your mixed use, your multifamily would be in those areas. And then it would step back to the yellow, which would be low density. The unique thing about the overlay, the way the draft code is written, is that low density doesn't have to be single family, right? It allows you to put your traditional single family developments in that you see today. But there is, we wrote a section for kind of a pocket neighborhood development. So depending on how that plays out, that could still meet that low density requirement, depending on how many units are on it and how much open space you have in there. You can go to the next one. Again, this is just kind of a diagram. So all the way on the right would be something that the T6 and SD. So this is form-based is also referred to as transect zoning sometimes, but those two columns on the right would be what you might see closest to 169 along that corridor. The T4, T5 is where you might see some of that multifamily mixed use buildings, commercial on the ground floor. And then again, stepping all the way back to your single family, traditional residential, low density residential development. So, you know, this is more intense than what you'll likely see, could potentially see here, but it gives you a good idea of, I guess, a visual of how the streetscape might change, function. Things will be closer, things could be closer, more intense. You can go to the next one. Again, so the top left is kind of that pocket neighborhood. The top right could be either residential only, or it could be a live work unit, depending on how those are set up. Bottom right is typical single family lots, and then you could also get, I don't know what your ADU code is. Again, these are just examples for visioning, so maybe you don't even allow them, but again, just showing examples of how you can be a little more creative with your uses and your density. If you want to go down, and again, so for your more intense commercial areas, these are all examples of things you might see. The bottom left is an actual built mixed use development in Ankeny, Iowa. That's where my office is. Office in Ankeny, Iowa. So that's down the street from us. But again, it gives examples of those more intense uses and density along those made traffic corridors, larger collector streets, your arterials, and then stepping back. That bottom left, or the top left shows a lot of green. It wouldn't all be green. It just doesn't show parking, for example, in that area, in that example. If you can go down. So really, that's where we're at. That's kind of the vision and the idea and the point of the way the ordinance was drafted. We can, if you want to go more into the weeds on the meetings and the website, we have those pulled up. We can pull those up on the screen. We can pull up the draft code too as well if you want. Talking through the draft ordinance, again, we on the zoning districts that would be allowed, we kept the R1, A, B, and C, and D. And I know that Jack and I had some discussion about that. And I think that's to allow single family duplex. Maybe in those base districts, you won't see it, but it allows that lot size to exist, that smaller lot size. We intentionally left industrial out as a base district. This isn't the vision here isn't for your traditional light industrial uses, your large buildings, your large parking lots, your heavier uses. However, in the permitted uses and the definitions, there are some, I believe we call them cottage or micro manufacturing. So there's an ability to have some of those uses that you know, a business that might manufacture something, but not on the scale where you're likely wholesaling on a large scale. You'll notice there is two different documents, one with definitions and the use table. I think those closely match up. The definitions in the code though, and the definitions in the definitions document are not the same. That is also intentional, since we're getting some feedback on what you may or may not want to allow. Some of those will move into the draft ordinance. Some of the definitions may need to be tweaked. You'll notice, you know, live, work, there's a limit on the floor area that can be residential versus commercial. In those mixed use buildings with commercial on the bottom and residential above, there's limits suggested on that. So either floor area or number of floors. So the first 2 floors, I believe the code says the first 2 floors is only where commercial can exist if you are a mixed use building. If you are a commercial building, I believe it says 75% of the building must be commercial, so that might need to be talked through. You know, we talked about some of the uses you have that we haven't included and were intentional, such as gas stations. That was an intentional decision to not include those into the use. Solar, it was intentional to only allow solar on the roof in this overlay to prevent, you know, a solar farm in the district, since it's not really in alignment with the vision. It's not a major employer, it's not a unique business, it's not residential. And some things are already covered in your code, so we didn't add extra regulations. We did call out separately indoor recreation and entertainment and personal services. So there's a difference with those that I don't think you're used to seeing in your existing code. Research industry is one I don't believe you have in your code existing. I can't remember correctly. And then that micro business wholesale, micro manufacturing, your cottage industrial. So that might be, you know, somebody, that could be anybody from, you know, maybe it's a little, maybe they sell their pottery enough. They need a bigger space than their basement or garage or house. It could be, you know, workshop / gallery space, or maybe even one of those live work buildings, you know, the front of the house or the main floor of the house could be their workshop area, their gallery area, or whatever. But it could also be someone who, you know, is making a non-artistic product as well. Micro manufacturing is limited, I think, regardless of what you call it, since we're intentionally not wanting to attract that stereotypical industrial user. It's limited to the, you know, the production and retail area shall not exceed 5,000 square feet. Same thing with the cottage industry and retail. There's it's limited to 1,000 square feet of a building. So there's kind of some nuances in the uses. Again, and then that use table, we have, if it's a dash line, it's not permitted in that base district at all. P is permitted, so you can do it with, you know, it's assumed as an allowed use with approval of your rezoning and or concept plan. And then that check mark means you need, it needs special consideration, whether that's a special use permit approved by staff with some additional, I guess I didn't ask, and I should. Do you guys do conditional rezonings in Smithville?
Not conditional rezoning, we do conditional use permits with
But not the
yeah.
rezoning specifically. Okay. So yeah, so that will just have, if it's a check mark, it's something that's going to be considered a little more carefully. So you'll notice that sometimes it's not the same, or not even in the same residential. Something might be permitted in R1 one B or C, but not in R1A, or, you know, you might have a use permitted in B2, but has a check mark in B1. And those are very intentional. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't discuss them, or if you have input and want to discuss them, absolutely, that's what we're here for tonight. But, you know, I think they're intentional, again, based on the vision and the comprehensive plan, the intent of the overlay district based on feedback we've gotten from the public and staff. So with that, we can answer any questions that you have or want to discuss, anything you want to discuss.
Julie, before we go for any further, I wanna re-ring a bell to highlight something. And that is, she mentioned it earlier, and that's the use versus form-based codes. And that is very important in this case because, as she's mentioned several times, we don't have an underlying industrial district, but the code or the comp plan says specifically that we should consider flex uses that have industrial in it. So the methodology is not to allow industrial, it's to allow the additional uses that she was talking about that are defined here that have an industrial feel to it with the limited 5,000 square feet or the like. So it's, if it's a B3 district in this overlay, it can have an industrial, something that isn't allowed in the B3 generally, but it would here because it's contained in a separate definition. So that is, you know, the functionality. I've mentioned it to Julie several times, and I know I've mentioned it to you. How this thing looks is really irrelevant to what I do. How it's enforced is all I do. So once you guys figure that out, that's my walking papers as to where I go, and that is to make sure I can enforce it. So you're going to have, always do, when it's something different, you're going to have a little blowback sometimes. But in this case, everything that she's put together for you meets exactly what the comprehensive plan said we should consider. So with that, I wanted to give an explanation as to why we've done some different definitions and the like.
I'll start. If I remember correctly, back when we did that original discussion with you via Zoom, I'm Melissa, I was on planning and zoning, and I'm an alderman as well. If I remember correctly, didn't we talk about maybe looking at more of that form-based, kind of like a combination with where we're at now, because that could possibly draw more in?
Right.
Correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's what she's done.
Right.
She has done that. Yeah.
So I understood that, but when I looked at the definitions and on that first one about the live work, I put down that I would be okay with if we had someone that come in that had a home occupation that allowed employees that don't live in that residence. And where I was going with, there are a lot of people who quilt. They may have people come in and work for them to run like their long arm or something like that. I'm just using that as one example that they might do that live work area. So that's where, and I didn't know if we'd have to discuss on how many employees or whether it's just, yes, they can do it. No, they can't. So I just wanted to share, I would be okay with that myself.
The underlying code doesn't allow home occupations to have separate employees,
Okay.
but it can be allowed here. That's the whole purpose of this code. If you allow it. And you've expressed you're fine
I
with that.
thought it would be interesting to discuss that further and see what others.
Yeah. I
thought.
mean, there's all kinds of micro industrial that you're talking about, like 3D print farms and things like that, that could be ran out of a loft or some sort of residential as well. So agroponics, all kinds of things that are
How
out
would
there.
how would we control the density of people if we was having a situation like that? I mean, because if you're having someplace that already has a high density of people, and then somebody goes into the loft and they have 5 or 6 people that start working there, then, I mean, that's creates some parking issues, I'm sure, but how do we control the density of the people in that area? Or not control, I shouldn't say, but how would we help monitor that, not create a
Yeah, part of it's the limiting
Hazard.
the square footage, cause that then fire code and thing kick in.
Some of it's bit like the mayor just said, some of it's built into the building codes. And some of it she's put in here with caps on how big it can be and those types of things.
But 1,000 square feet can hold quite a few people. Are there occupancy limits in,
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
well, but they're not
I-
really occupying because they're not living there.
Well, no, occupancy, if you're talking about a business, you've got commercial code that's involved. And there's
Where the fire
entire
code limits how
sections.
many
it's-
people can be in there.
Right.
what time.
And how many
And that's the
bathrooms you
other
need
thing.
and all that.
That's when you're talking about those kinds of things, the fire code, that's not part of any of our discussion because it's handled through a district. He will be addressing those when they're trying to set those up.
And water fountains and all kinds of fun stuff you have to put in now.
Yeah. I mean, you got, there's egress paths, so that controls the shape of the building, how far it is to a door and all those things. Those are controlled in a building code scenario that addresses not only your concern, but it does a lot to Billy's concern as it relates to density.
Yeah, I don't think we want to have it. I think more density in Smithville will probably be good for a lot of things,
Right.
but we don't want to turn out to be like a part of downtown Parkville where you can't move around because they got everything built out to the edge of the street and you can't park.
Well, the thing, like, if you think about what's completely already allowed, if you look at a business like one of the chain massage places where you have 9 rooms that have 12 employees and 12, 9 to 12 people there at a time, that's 24 cars and 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
That's already allowed.
Yeah.
I mean,
And the other aspect of it is, the proliferation of those concerns throughout the city is one thing, but if we can focus the flexibility to allow it to get a little closer to the uncomfortable nature, if we can focus it in one area or in a very specific area, not necessarily one, it gives us the ability to open ourselves up a little more, but still address your concerns. Obviously, any conceptual plan that has that density issue will be before this board for approval.
and in
And
the.
those are issues that will be addressed.
And in these zoning, we have off-street parking requirements in B4, we don't right now, right? So,
Right.
for example, if you put a detail shop in downtown, you got a lot of cars right next to you now that you didn't have 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And
I will say that since parking just came up, I will point out too that the
Should happen.
draft ordinance parking section, it does allow, those ratios are less than what you see in a typical, I guess, subdivision
Yep.
business park. So that's something else to think about too. One, I think, there's reasons for that. One, you want this to be kind of a live work area in those more intense districts, parts of the area, up along 169 specifically. But then also, I think we can all agree, sometimes with controversy, it comes with controversy, but like a Walmart or a Target, you really don't see those parking lots full except for certain days of the year. So a lot of communities are moving to parking minimums or maximums instead of minimums. This does not do that, but it does allow some relief for your retail and restaurant type uses. It does say though that it does say uses not listed below follow the standard parking. So not everything would get kind of a relief and of parking requirements.
Jack, I got a question for you too. Refresh my memory with R1A and R1B.
It's R1A is 100-foot wide lot. R1B is 75, C is 60, and D is 50. So it's lot widths for where the house could sit.
in most typical subdivisions in Smithville, then you wouldn't be able to do a live work unless you got into that 60-foot mark.
Well, I think you could do it just about anywhere, depending on what kind
Well,
of building you
just-
put on
It
it.
says that you
if you have
can't.
an
It says on
ADU,
here you can't. That's what I'm saying. Isn't that right? Am I reading that right? Live
Yeah,
work
so
dwelling?
we have R1, A and B as live work not permitted. I think specifically along that northern edge where some of those single family residences already exist.
Barton Heights.
You don't want to see an apartment building or a retail area right up against those. It's not comfortable for them. So I think it's intentional to allow on the north and west edge to allow that more traditional single family. But yes, so R1C, which did you say that's 50? 75?
60.
R1C is 60 and R1D is 50.
Yeah. So you'll see more intense. You might still have only single family, but it'll be more dense than you would.
So we're just, because would Hill Shannon be in that?
Hills of Shannon is in our R1B district generally.
Okay.
Um,
So you still wouldn't have people operating businesses out of a subdivision like that?
well, if they built a subdivision like that in this district,
Yes.
it's, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's specifically not allowed.
But then right below it says single family. Oh, no,
You gotta do
Yep.
go over to where
Yep, I got you. I got you.
the live work dwelling.
And I will, in that single family dwelling scenario, you'll see it's permitted all the way up through R2 and then it's a special approval in R3. That's more restrictive than our current code. Current code allows single family dwellings in R3.
Cause the intent is if they're gonna use R3 here, we want it to be for multifamily for density.
Yes,
Since it's closer to 435, closer to
yes.
the urban.
Well, and in an employment center, that
Yeah.
is part of the, not only do you need to have people that have additional housing for Smithville, but it's also very good to have employees that can live close.
Right.
And if it's a restaurant type job, you're not going to want a bunch of single family detached housing because they won't live there.
Right.
They'll be driving for miles and miles and miles. But if there's a rental in a smaller apartment that they can afford, they will live in Smithville. And they can work right there.
Yep. Makes sense.
Well, we dropped it out of here because we wanted to focus the B4 type businesses in our downtown core. And the B4 allows a lot of businesses, but it allows less than the B3. So B1, 2, and 3, yeah. And it was more of a, once we started talking about downtown over the last year, we really needed to, let's keep downtown unique.
No, we have to do-
And
that's where all
Perry,
this is.
I will highlight in my thought, when that discussion was going on, the purpose of that is we have to have an area that you can
Just, it's in-
continue to allow to develop like the
Like
B4
B3
district, but it also helps maintain that small town feel. That small town feel has been an indelible mark on every comprehensive plan
You
in
can have-
Smithville since
varsity
1966.
lot, B3 lot.
Maintain the small town feel has always been an item.
Yeah, and the green space and the walkability of this makes it. Pull that off.
Yep.
So any changes that we need to provide back to them or is?
Thoughts, comments? I know Melissa has already discussed with me earlier some issues she's discovered that we'll clean up when we get to the final version, some misspellings and duplicated words and that kind of stuff. This is a 30,000 foot view in October. We hope to have it fully cleaned up based upon your comments and we'll move forward. And at that hearing as well, we will, it'll be advertised to the public again. And hopefully we will have some public comment there where people will come in. Otherwise, I'm hopeful that we've got people watching on YouTube Live. I know somebody in Texas is, so.
There is we do have a timeline on the website too, so if they click on the link on the city's website, sorry. If they click on the link on the city's website, it takes them to the project webpage, and there is a list of meetings and upcoming meetings, so.
So Jack, on like, if you go to the building design section, which is like the second last page, right? And we start looking at things like the
Okay.
minimum 35% visibility. But we also need to update our sign ordinance so that if they don't, you know, if they do make a glass that you can see in and then they cover it with film, you know, it defeats the purpose, right?
Well, one aspect of that is, we've been requested by an alderman to talk about the
Yeah.
sign code generally
Yeah.
in town. And we've got an old one, and there have been many Supreme Court cases since then that we have to adjust. We will be bringing that forward to the Board of Aldermen with a work session to discuss concepts of where they want to go. And then obviously anything out of that will have to come back here.
Yeah, I know some cities have made changes for even, you know, public safety reasons, if it's blacked out or not permeable film, you know, and they get an alarm, they come there, somebody can be hiding, it's, you know.
Yeah, and that
It's the issue
is,
too.
those are obviously very important issues to discuss when it comes down to that. The purpose of the glass, the transparent stuff is to not necessarily be able to see in, but it's to break down the giant facade.
Yeah.
Because whatever, if there's a film on it, generally, there's some kind of lighting that comes through and that lighting breaks up the entire facade somewhat as well. Now, I will tell you, there are some films that don't allow light out, so.
And that's what I'm referring to, you know,
Yeah.
if they do when it comes to the sign, they have to put some, you know, I don't think we currently regulate
Inside
the
signs,
signs on the glass.
if it's, yeah, especially those that are on the inside, we can't regulate.
Yeah.
That's their building. They have a window, they could build a giant sign in neon just inside it, and that's perfectly allowable without permit.
Right.
But it takes up a lot of square footage.
Or you park a box van with a bunch of
Yeah.
signage on it that isn't
Yeah.
a sign.
Yep.
I had a question regarding, on the second page, item number H, a list of all property owners within 185 feet of the boundaries of the proposed area. Is that talking about signage? That like for the area, the district, what exactly is that?
Oh,
Well-
that's, Jack, that's the section that comes from your code directly right now, and I believe you just have
notice.
to include who they are in your application, I believe is what you're
Yes.
saying.
Names, the names and addresses, they have to provide all that data
Okay.
to us. Any zoning change and a conceptual plan overlay district, when they come with a concept plan, our code considers it also a zoning change. It has to follow the same rules. So if someone comes in and changes an area in here to B3, that concept plan, and they bring a concept plan, that concept plan can be changed in the future if things change. They just have to come forward with a concept plan change. And when they do, all the people within 185 feet of that get the notice. And that is a state law requirement, again. And in the more dense areas with a bunch of property owners, it gets expensive now. Currently, what is it, $10 and
$10 a letter.
$10 a letter? Yeah. So
Probably
luckily,
cheaper
the
just to
city,
knock
the
on
city
doors.
pays that up front, and then we bill it back to the applicant. But you know, some developments next to an existing subdivision, if it was a denser one, you could have 50 or 60 letters. Or more. I mean, we've had as many as, early on, we had one that had 71.
Say,
So
didn't, the one on Maple, didn't you had a pretty big stack? The one right across from Maple Elementary.
it wasn't 71.
Yeah, pretty good size.
But yeah, you know, so you're talking, you know, 800, close to $750, $800 reimbursement just for the letters to go out. Now we're talking about usually a bigger scenario where you've got, that cost is something that they can manage. But yeah, the cost has not went down. It was 465 when I started.
I got a lot of forever stamps that were
Yeah,
bought in 30 cents.
yep. Yeah, I wish I
So-
would have.
On the
Save
residential
those.
mixed use, one of the comments said regulate by feet or by floors.
Where, which aspect, and Julie wrote this, she may remember where you're talking about. Can you give us a
In
specific?
the, well, in the definition, so
That's
it,
on the
like, there's
definition.
3 columns and the last column, there's just kind of, those are just like thoughts, I guess, I
Okay,
had.
yeah.
And one of them is a question like, do you want, so if you have residential above commercial, do you think it's necessary to regulate the design of that building or the structure? So that there's a minimum requirement, of floors or feet. I know sometimes depending on the look you're going for or a developer might be going for, that can make a difference on the architecture of the building. You know. And
Because
maybe
if
it
you-
doesn't need to be addressed at all.
Yeah.
Because again, that will give the developer flexibility to propose something.
My first thought, Julie, is I don't fully understand the point
Mhm.
myself, so I can't help Terry. But maybe if you could give us a specific example of a feet or floors
Right.
scenario.
So in some instances, you could have the first floor, the interior, it might look like, or structurally be like, what's 12 feet, 10 feet, like a commercial space? Is that
Yeah.
kind of normal? But then, but if you do that, so on the exterior, you kind of have that 10-foot or 12-foot look, but inside structurally, it maybe that's a floor and a half, So sometimes depending on the use and the architecture style, sometimes it makes a difference if it is regulated by floor number or the actual numbers of feet. Again, if you don't, I don't think you have to, I just didn't know if anybody had, again, it's just like, is this necessary? If you don't have it, then it's something that they can propose in their concept plan and then you can review it and discuss it.
Yeah.
So.
And what I've noticed when you get these is that everybody has a sore thumb and it bumps on certain things and yours will bump if that's something in there that you don't like. It's like, oh, and oh, wow, you'll see it immediately. An example of what she's talking about across the street, that project, only building B, which is on Main Street, has the commercial. And it's, there'll be full 12-foot ceilings there. Building A around it, which is all residential, has much shorter ceiling heights. They're 10s. So when you look at it, everything's over there on floors 2 through 4 have to be the same. So in that one over there, they've got an 18-inch footing differential just to make up that difference. So that the floors can level out. And that's the scenario. If you had 2 of those together, 2 12-footers, that's 3 8-foot ceilings. That's almost 3 stories. If you had 2 commercials and 2, residentials above it. So it changes the look of the building substantially.
It's gonna go to.
But again, as she mentioned, you get to make those questions and decisions during a conceptual plan hearing anyway.
I think if we look at, I'm trying to figure out which slide it's on.
I would make a reference back to the same box that you were talking about as it relates to incentives. Should there be incentives for affordable housing? Yeah, okay. Well, and I thought it might be, from my perspective, knowing the existing board and, you know, how things are working, if you suggest an incentive, I think the best way to handle it is to allow a more dense, to allow density to be more, you know, closer, tightly packed to get affordable. But if you want to have that layer of density, you have to have 10% or whatever percentage in affordable housing.
So what's the actual definition of affordable housing?
Good luck.
Right. So some of these questions are just thoughts because I've worked, I looked at codes that I'm already familiar with, plus I looked at like Leawood and Kansas City and I don't know, several other communities around in your area. Ones I've worked with and some of them I've seen, like he suggested about, a certain density and 10% of them have to be affordable, then there's some type of, incentive or maybe like they get a reduction on something else. I've worked with a code that specifically required any new multifamily was electric only, so no gas. So, there's different communities have different priorities. So I just kind of put those in there as questions. Is there anything in Smithville that, is a priority that you might want to address here, since it is a unique and new development area?
But if we wanted to incentivize affordable housing, wouldn't there have to be something set? Wouldn't we have to have an ordinance or something to state what it is so that we
Well-
can make sure actually have a standard for it to go to? Because
Right.
if we just say affordable housing, it depends on who you are.
Well,
Somebody that
there-
makes $1 million, a $500,000 house is not, it's
Yeah.
affordable housing.
There are federal guidelines that regulate what are considered affordable. That's why you hear a lot of new stuff. When they're talking about affordable, they don't call it affordable to avoid that conflict. They call it workforce housing. Something that the average firefighter, police officer starting out, school teacher.
And it's
Can
30%
afford.
of gross income. So if we're building Class A office and we know it's gonna be $200,000 a year lawyers, it's 30%. But if we're building restaurants and light manufacturing that are gonna be $40,000-$50,000 jobs, then it's 30% of that is rent is affordable.
And some communities and states have tax credits too for some of that stuff. So that's why
Yeah.
question mark doesn't need addressed.
Yeah.
So.
And that is a much bigger discussion for the entire community that we have in the comp plan coming in years 7 through 10 of the first 10 years of the comp plan. I think it's it's one of the things that is something that it recommends we discuss, incentivizing housing and what that looks like if we do it. And that is a touchy subject here.
But the concept that we're going out here, if you don't have things for people to live, then you go back to your scenario that you mentioned earlier that if they're working in a restaurant and they don't have a affordable place to live, they're driving miles and miles, and that hurts the development.
And then as soon as there's a job next to their house, they're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only does it cause problems for the workforce, but it adds even more traffic.
Yeah.
Even more traffic. And if we can get housing for the folks that will stay here. I mean, that's been the problem in you asked just about any owner of a service industry business here in town. That's their hardest thing is getting people to come to work here. And it's not because the job's horrible. It's they find a job that's closer to where they live because they don't live here.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
So if
Didn't break it.
the next